We have a very unorthodox guest today. We have with us Deepta Roy Chakraverti. She is the daughter disciple of India's most celebrated Wiccan, Ipsita Roy Chakraverti. Everyone should know that I am a wise woman. The home and the background I had around me when I was a child, when I was growing up. While you would probably seek out an ocha and quack science in some sense, one of the main things about being a Wiccan or a witch or a Dakini or a Daini, whatever word you call it, is that you come to realize the tremendous amount of superstition which has always been against anyone who is a Wiccan. The witch hunting which goes on, it is not only in rural India, it is not only in the villages, not only there, as I would say. I would say it is there even in our society, in the cities, in metros. The targets are always women who are strong, who are opinionated, and who are not afraid to voice their opinion. I would often, actually, with my naked eyes, see spirit orbs. They would float around me. They would be like little playful balls of light. At that time, I would think, oh, maybe like children do. There's actually something floating by in the air, or there's something drifting in through the window. In Wicca, we are trained in an understanding of the spirit world, which is perhaps closest to the old spiritualist movement. I'd like to welcome all the viewers of the Coffee House Experience to the latest episode of our show. We have a very unorthodox guest today. Typically, this show focuses on very hard, realist topics such as politics, economics, etc., etc. Today's topic is quite orthogonal to what we typically do on this show. We have with us Deepta Roy Chakraverti, and I will actually read out Deepta's introduction from her latest book. Two aspects to her personality. The first orthodox aspect would be that Deepta is a lawyer from King's College London and also has a first degree in mathematics from Delhi University. She worked as a corporate lawyer for 10 years before returning to her first love, which is Wicca. She is the daughter disciple of India's most celebrated Wiccan, Ipsita Roy Chakraverti. And in a country like India, where the word Daini or Dakini has negative connotations associated with it, typically, more often than not, framed by a patriarchal society, she has the strength to go forward fearlessly in the face of a doubting society. And she also conducts the Wiccan Brigade's Golden Arc Study Circle. Welcome, Deepta Di, to today's episode. Thank you. Thank you very much. So let's start at the very beginning, which is, I think, the most obvious question. Was your journey to Wicca as a lifestyle very organic? Like, why I'm asking you this question is, you saw two figures probably at home. One is your mother, who was and is still a practicing Wiccan, and your father, who is probably not related to this field at all. So you actually did the mathematics, you did law, very analytical courses, and then you embraced Wicca as a lifestyle. I'd actually call it a lifestyle rather than a profession, right? So could you probably explain the journey? And maybe if you can, for our viewers, maybe start with what the word Wicca means. That would be a good introduction. If I say I'm a Wiccan or I practice Witchcraft or Witchcraft, that means everyone should know that I am a wise woman. In the old days in the West, they would be called wise women. They were the first healers, the stateswomen, the counselors.
They were the go-to people, and they were women, mostly women. To come back to your question about my beginnings, yes, you're absolutely right. My I came into a home, into a family, which on one hand, my father was from high government, Indian government service. So that was a very orthodox part. He had majored in statistics and mathematics, and he was a person of science. He was a very analytical person. And he was, of course, with the officialdom of government of India, posted at in high-ranking places in Delhi, where I also did my college and school years. My mother was the one, like you say, who brought in Wicca into this part of the world. And the beloved witch is one who has broken every set orthodox line you can think of. So here, my father of the very orthodox and my mother completely unorthodox. And then there's me. So the home and the background I had around me when I was a child, when I was growing up, I think had the best of both worlds, because it had the strong backbone of the Orthodox. It had the family background, which also went into our old Indian royalty coming from Kuch Bihar and Mayurbhanj, because through my mother, I come from the family of Keshav Chandra Sen. And Keshav Chandra was the Brahmo Samaj, rather the rebel Brahmo Samaj, if you would say that, the maker of the Church of New Dispensation. And through him, Shuniti Devi of Kuch Bihar and Shucharu Devi of Mayurbhanj. So all in all, it was a very interesting background, which I was born to. And even when I was seeing the very unorthodox through my mother, I was seeing the unorthodox through the background of that steel which comes from the old Bengal aristocracy. Because she was all said and done from that blue blood of Bengal. And perhaps that is why bringing Wicca, a subject like Wicca, witchcraft, into our part of the world has at all been possible. Because it requires, in our part of the world, it requires a certain stamp to bring in such very new terms at that time into our country. You need a bit of pedigree, you need a bit of blue blood, you need very good looks, and you need that kind of background which our people will listen to and respect. All said and done, that is a fact of life. A jewel shines brightest in the best setting. So that is what I came into. And throughout my growing up years, as I went to school, college, everything, I think I veered from, I took up the sciences, school I remember. I did mathematics in Delhi at Mary College, and then I did law at King's in London. My parents have always encouraged me to follow whichever way I want to. And I think they were very proud when I took up these two, what is perceived as difficult subjects.
I think it's a very interesting thing that you touched upon. It's as much about the message as it is about the messenger, right? So, in a rural setting, while you would probably seek out an oja and like quack science in some sense, has ojas at their cynosure where they would act as healers. All of them might not really have healing powers, but they might claim to have healing powers. But women are castigated more often than not as witches, and it might not be that they have supernatural powers or they are dealing with the occult. If they are standing up to patriarchy, they are strong enough, they might be branded as witches and be castigated. So, in your work thus far, have you noticed this binary of sorts? And generally, like in urban settings, do you have students or do you have peers who have adopted Wicca as a lifestyle?
Yes, to let's say to expand your question a little bit, if I may. One of the main things about being a Wiccan or a witch or a Dakini or a Daini, whatever wording you call it, is that you come to realize the tremendous amount of superstition which has always been against anyone who is a Wiccan Dakin. And that is stemming not from today or from yesterday, but from, like you were saying, it is somehow inbred in our the very fabric of our society. It is perhaps at one time it was there in the West, but today it is very, very less. Whereas in our part of the world, it has survived. I mean, surprisingly strongly. Superstition, however much we may say our countries going forward or women are emancipated, when it comes to superstition, there we go, because that has become more and more a handle which you can use to stamp on women who are forging ahead. When you have nothing else in hand, that is a handle you can use. So when you look at the very idea of witches or Wiccans in today's modern world, the witch hunting which goes on, it is not only in rural India, it is not only in the villages, not only there, as I would say. I would say it is there even in our society, in the cities and metros. It is not always that you need to, whip a woman or tie her to a pole and parade her around the streets. It is done in various ways. It is done through slander. It is done through little campaigns of perhaps office politics. It is done in communities and in neighborhoods where they want to gang up against a woman who maybe is not towing the general para line or is not posing up to the boss as the rest of the lot are. So witch hunts in that way survive in every part of society under different guises. The targets are always women who are strong, who are opinionated, and who are not afraid to voice their opinions. They are usually very good looking. That is somehow the equation, the way it has worked out. When it comes to the ojhas, like you were talking about, who are very much there in slightly more rural areas, yes, they are often rewarded for doing their banishing of what they say, the evil spirit in a person. They are even often set against witches or Dians. But when a woman is called upon to do some healing work or some, helping someone, then she is called a witch, and the very same ojha will come in. But so it is a matter of perception. It is a matter of having a handle in the nature of superstition and driving that fear into people. Perhaps someone's not well. Perhaps a child is sick somewhere in a village or a community. And there happens to be a woman who would be a useful scapegoat. Perhaps she has rebuffed the advances of the local wound. Perhaps she has property to her name and she's the sole owner. And she is not complying with signing it over. So these are very handy tools by which to get rid of, or to at least get a very good leverage on her to get her to do what she wants. But as I said, not only in rural India, witch hunts, I think, are there wherever there are.
The perfect example would be Rhea Chakraborty, who was accused of doing black magic during the Sushant Singh Rajput case, and you had all news channels discussing that on prime time. So yeah, but, we
Okay.
take to, yep.
Even Angelina Jolie, that actress from Hollywood.
Yes. Yep.
If I remember right, she was accused of using witchcraft against Brad Pitt, wasn't she?
Yep.
Then Kangana, Bollywood.
Hrithik Roshan. Yep. Yes.
The list is endless. Wherever you need a little ambiguous kind of handle, use witchcraft.
Yep.
That's what.
Maybe now let's go to the early years. So one thing that I really gathered from your first book is uh, being a Wiccan is inextricably linked with the sense of perception, right? You don't take anything at a at face value. You actually unpeel the layers and you can look deeper, and that's something that comes across in your chapter on the Konark. So just curious, early on, did you have some experiences which kind of gave you a sense that you had this extra perception? Because for your mother, she has spoken in interviews about her interaction with Homi Bhabha and about the fact that I think she was speaking with an elephant. The Mahout could not control the elephant. She could. So just curious, what was your first reckoning of sorts?
Well, I think the first part was, you might have heard about spirit orb photography, which is being worked on in the West actually by two researchers. They call it the Orb Project. One of them actually is from the Vatican. Another one is a NASA scientist, Heinemann is one. So when I was very, very young, perhaps what, less than 10 years old, I would often actually, with my naked eyes, see spirit orbs. They would float around me. They would be like little playful balls of light. At that time, I would think, oh, maybe like children do. There's actually something floating by in the air, or there's something drifting in through the window. Later, I would think of something about my eyes, but then my eyes thankfully turned out all right, and they appeared even when the window was shut. So later on, I guessed that no, there must be a bit more to it. Then it was through these orbs that I started getting little voices or insights. Perhaps not a voice speaking clearly in my ear, like you and I are speaking, not like that, but perhaps a voice in the head, which would give me a message or a sign or a little bit of hint that do this or do that, or stay away from this, or look that way. Things like that. So little signs. It started like that. But these orbs of light were very beautiful. Sometimes they were violet, sometimes they were ringed with sort of incandescent blue or white. And years later, I realized they were actually spirit orbs. So I think my experiences would start like that. But what you talk about from my book, Hunger to Bedlam, that was the first one in 20.
Yep.
Over there, I have talked about experiences, which I would call psychical, in places ranging from Rajasthan's Bhangarh to Bedlam in Britain, to places even in Calcutta, like the Ravindra Sarovar Lake area. So I think, like you say, perception or being more aware and attuned awareness is something which is very intrinsic to being a Wiccan, because it is as a Wiccan that you are so much more aware that there are so many more layers which lie beyond what is very obvious. The problem is that when you are seeing or believing it, how much of it is actual and how much of it is cooked up by your own, by your own head. That is always that factor one must always be aware of. So it is somewhat through trial and error and somewhat through verification and through a bit of testing yourself that you come to realize fact from fiction. Because that, I think, is the biggest hazard. People might get so excited that, because you have seen, that kind of. And when all around us, the media is full of ghost stories and movies and things, you want to feel part of it, and you're very young. So that danger is there. But once you cross over it and you apply your logic and your thought, then, yeah, you're clear.
Like, for example, It's the spirit of Surajbai, right? So what was the process like? Maybe if we could double click on that one example. So you probably went to Bhangarh Fort, and it has a tumultuous history, and there is this spirit that you could sense there. Um, how do you actually filter out the noise from the fact and maybe come at a conclusion that this wasn't a stray incident of your imagination, but this is really a spectral existence that you are seeing or experiencing in some form or shape?
Well, Bhangarh, we're talking of Bhangarh Fort in Rajasthan, and Bhangarh already has a tremendous, let's say, reputation
Yep.
everywhere. I don't think there's any place more famous than Bhangarh in India as a haunted place. So the danger, like you say, is you're already going in with a preconceived notion that, hi, I have to see a ghost. If I haven't seen a ghost, then what am I doing here? That kind of thing is already in your head. So that is a big danger. Now, the the point is that when you do go into the place is beautiful. It is awe-inspiring. It is the huge fort set on a hilly rise, and the ramparts stand so strong and silent, and it's full of shadows and niches and outfits. But it has its own magnetism. That is a part, perhaps, which you can only feel or sense. You cannot really put it in a mathematical grid. That is some. The other thing is, even when you are going in so aware that it is allegedly India's most haunted place, uh, once you acclimatize to the place, you stop jumping at shadows. You stop looking over your shoulder. And I have seen in my experience that spirit apparitions, they come forth the easiest or quickest when you're not looking.
Okay.
You are not looking that, okay, 5 o'clock or 10 o'clock, here is a spirit appearing. Not like that. It just appears so naturally next to you as if it would be a person. And that is how the formation happens. That is how, perhaps, even if there is to be any communication,
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. And that's a great segue to come to your latest book where you talk about a similar place, right? Which is also from where the cover of your book is derived. It's Poveglia. I don't know the exact pronunciation. Is it
Plague Island. They call it Plague Island in it.
Plague Island, the bubonic plague, right? So I'm just curious, like all these stories where in your latest book you actually probably take a myth or some haunted place, story around a haunted place, and weave a narrative around it. What's your research process like? Like, do you come across these myths or these stories through your work for your organization, or is it something that you actively seek out, or is it from literature that you read? What's the process like? Maybe if you could.
Yes, from literature that I read. Actually, it is um, partly through my natural interest in the supernatural. So perhaps over the years, I have visited places which are like in this offbeat genre, or perhaps I have seen a travel book which talks of it, or I've heard about it from a friend who has been there, but they just pop up. And the story writing process, I think that comes when um, a place really appeals or a idea appeals, you find yourself transported over there. So it is as if you are imagining yourself over there, and that becomes almost a tangible, tactile feeling. So that is how I think, even in fiction, when you are writing it, when I'm writing it, it becomes almost nonfiction for me as a writer.
Right.
And that is how it happens. But it is true when you are talking about the offbeat or the supernatural. Um, you talked about the Golden Ankh, which I run, but it's
Yep.
part of the Wiccan Brigade. It is a wing of the Wiccan Brigade, where we delve into um, strange places or old myths or legends or archaeological finds from around the world. And we try and look at them from a point which is not really directly supernatural, which is not really, full of um, a lot of the preconceived notions. We try and look at it very clinically, with respect, but clinically, because first, to have your own ideas about a subject, you have to first know it. And if you start going into it with all your preconceived notions, then you can't really know it because you're already going into it believing that it is in a certain way. So I think when writing about the supernatural, for me, it is a bit like that. I first have to know it and then I jump.
Makes sense. So, uh, coming to your latest book, there are some themes that you actually tackle there. One of them is planchets, right? And you focus on it may be a wrong connection. You seek out someone, you get someone else, or or a story about breaking a circle and letting a spirit in. Just curious, like in your lifestyle or in Wicca as a lifestyle or in your training when you were an apprentice under your mother, right? So do you also do stuff like voodoo, planchets? Just curious. Or do you study them theoretically? Is it something that you would do practically? Just curious.
No, I get it. A lot of people have do ask me about this. When we talk about things, these are all things to do with the spirit world, right?
Yep.
Planchette or Ouija boards and things like that, seances. In Wicca, we are trained in an understanding of the spirit world, which is perhaps closest to the old spiritualist movement of Renaissance Bengal.
Right.
And over there, you perceive the spirit world as an extension of this world. So not like a, Hindi serial with things flying out of your head and jaws coming out, fangs coming out like that.
Not the Z horror show or Ahat, basically. Yeah, exactly. Yes.
So the spirit world is actually a very close extension of our world, the the normal world we see. And someone might be sitting right next to you or next to me. And the spirit world could be as close as that. It could be a loved one who is no more. It could be a beloved pet who has crossed over. But that simplicity with which the spirit world is viewed is what brings it also closer. You don't need to do cartwheels around the ups and go or hang upside down from a tree to connect with the spirit world. And I would like to say, when talking about the spirit world, that I think there is another reason why in our Wiccan training, the spirit world is so important to us. If we were talking about Keshav Sen, now in he was also very involved with the spiritualist movement. He was part of seances. He was part of the whole movement which tried to delve into contacting the other side. And perhaps it is almost in the genes and the blood that it should again revive through Wiccan Brigade in this era. So, spirit world, to answer your question, contact through Planchette or seances. Seances, I have been part of one or two. Planchette, I had never gone into that. But even with seances, I have found that you don't, if you have a little bit of the psychic in you, a little bit of what we say the sixth sense in you, and if you're trying to contact someone who was close to you, and you don't really need a lot of organization. You can do it just sitting by yourself in a quiet room. You don't really need a lot of paraphernalia. You just need that focus.
Okay, so that probably breaks a myth I had where the paraphernalia I often felt was integral to some of these exercises, probably, may not. So, just double clicking on what you just mentioned, even quote unquote rationalists like Thomas Edison, Newton, they believed in the occult and they believed in um, s- the existence of a soul or a spirit after a body perishes, right? The spirit does not perish in some sense. Why do you think I think that there with phobias like them who believed in such a conception, why do you think generations further down started looking at this as mumbo jumbo and started seeing this in a negative light in some sense? Like if you are a rationalist, you cannot ascribe to such notions and vice versa. It's almost like a watertight compartment.
Well, for that, to answer that, that's actually a very interesting question, because to answer that, I think you would have to compare a bit of the West and the East. Now, in
Right.
the West, say Thomas Edison, who is famous for his spirit machine, also like a telephone to contact the dead. The West, even today, has organizations, for example, like the Spiritualist Association of Great Britain. And they're in London. Then there is the Psychical Society, which is in the US and in UK. And they see the spirit world in a very, like I was saying, in a very simple and like an extension of this world, that kind of manner. But like you said, in our part of the world, everything is full of, oh, if you believe in woo-woos and spirits and iska to kuch gadbad hai
Yeah.
kind of. You know? But one reason I think is fear. We are actually very afraid of what we cannot see. And in fact, if Bluetooth had not been patented, I think we'd be afraid of that also. So it is fear plays a big part in our perception of the spirit world, because if you look at the media, I mean, say films, TV, things like that, the visual media, when they talk of or when they project their supernatural or spirits, or hauntings, they do it in one of two ways. Either it is completely over the top and ridiculous. I mean, it is so exaggerated that it becomes ridiculous, or they do it in such a way that it is a spoof
Yep.
in a funny way. Nothing wrong with that, but it is a funny way. But if you try to present the supernatural or a spirit or a haunting as is in reality, I think our people get it because that means there is something we have no control over. That is something you cannot buy over. That is something you cannot use a source to go and influence. That is something you have no control over. And that scares people. That scares people, and it requires perhaps a certain degree of understanding, basic understanding of the supernatural, to accept it as.
And I think this is as much about public posturing, because if you read your mother's memoirs, it's fairly clear that several leading folks from Bollywood, the political sphere, they did reach out to her, and they might disclaim something in public, but private lies, public truths, vice versa, right? So that dynamic keeps on going.
Absolutely, you're right, because like my mother has written about and talked about the time when Ekta Kapoor tried to get her to endorse Ekti Dayan, saying that they wanted to perpetuate the myths of witchcraft or Wicca, and money is no object. So, and she put her foot down, and what happened afterwards is history. Everyone knows that story. That is it. You see, the perception which our media world want to give to the people will only serve to take them further and further away from the reality of the spirit world.
Okay.
And that is one of the saddest things for our part of the world.
Yep. Coming to Wicca as a lifestyle, I'm just curious, is it monastic? Is the process of learning monastic, or is it uh, more free flowing? Like, because you are core to the movement in India in some sense, in Asia actually. I just want to understand what is the lifestyle like, apart from the healing aspect of it, obviously.
The lifestyle is I get up, I have my breakfast, I like my tea, I mean, that's one part of the lifestyle. The in a more serious vein, the monastic part, you are right, that is the correct word. Because even while we are going about our day to day, our jobs, our household work, whatever it may be, there is one part of us who are trained in this school of thought, which is, like, we are stoical. We do not get extremely, like, jump over the moon over something. Neither do we go into the depths of grief and depression over anything. And that is why you will find that Wiccans are not very prone to all these maladies which affect so many today. They are not prone to depressions and anxiety and this and that. Because within us, we have that core of stillness. Because that is what sees us through from the highs and the lows and the ups and the downs. That must always be intact. And various other things which to some people might seem a bit strange. Little things are important to us. Household chores are important. Doing it yourself, not in the mem-sub category that, oh, my nails are so long, I will not wash my cup and plate. No, not like that.
Okay.
Being very rooted, very grounded in reality, and yet having your sights so high enough to be aware that there is something called destiny and there is something called the divine.
Makes sense. Just curious, like, given that you also practice healing now, what are the kind of problems that people would typically come to you with? Because obviously, I do understand there might be someone with malified intentions. They want to get something for like to satisfy their greed, or they want to harm someone. But generally, if you look at someone who actually wants healing, what are the kind of problems that you typically tend to face where Vika can be helpful?
I'll first give you one clarification. I myself don't practice healing. I am in the teaching area, the
Okay.
golden
Okay.
teaching area. My mother, she does have healing sessions sometimes, and the requests for slots which come in, they come into Wiccan Brigade, from which she screens and picks out. Even we have Wiccan Sanctuary Days, which are live on Facebook, where prayer requests are read out and multi-faith prayers, you could say, are said, because that is a very crucial part of our system, that we believe in the power of prayer. The kinds of problems which come in, they are so many. We have a standard policy. We do not take requests related to love and marriage, because those are not really what we look at when we look at when we shortlist things. They are to do with perhaps health matters. They are to do with loss, suffering, things like that. Perhaps a lot of psychological disturbance, mental disturbance, nerve issues, but these kinds of things. And they come in from all over the world, and they are shortlisted by my mother, Ipsita, and then she sometimes has these sessions virtually. She's doing them virtually for now.
Okay. Makes sense. Makes sense. I just want to understand about the Golden Arc Circle. You did mention that you are in the process of teaching now, right? So, how does it work? The teaching process, is it like the typical Gurukul Shishya process where you actually impart knowledge, or is there a compendium of sorts which you reference, which has maybe information over the ages compiled into a volume or several volumes? Just curious, how is the tradition like?
Yeah, I love that idea of a compendium.
I wish. Yeah, you think?
Good idea. Hmm. No, but the Golden Ankh is something actually I started a little over 2 years ago. Um, Initially, I had made it only for women. Very recently, I started allowing men in also. Um, but it is mostly like a smaller group session. I keep it limited to about 6 to 8 people, not more than that. And the subjects we go into, for example, it could be the hidden faces of Dhumavat, or it could be the Mosque of Inanna, or it could be Egyptian myths, or it could be something like doctors and exorcists in Mesopotamia. It could be ghost brides of China. So you see, we're spanning the globe, and
Right.
we're looking at various perhaps myths. We are looking at figures of connected with religion. We are looking at archaeological finds, archaeological sites like the Warka Mosque. Uh, the, we are looking at old sites which have been excavated, and we are trying to tone our minds into such a way that to sift through all the material which is there and to discover our, let's say, what we are looking for in there, because we are looking for the point where mysticism meets history, meets anthropology, and that itself is a fascinating journey, because there is so much in the world through all the centuries which we as yet do not know. And to delve into that is itself a very intellectually stimulating exercise. Um, Sometimes those who are regular attendees, they are invited to speak on something they have found or they have a place they have visited. And the ideas and the theories which come down are very fascinating. Say spells and chants which have been used ages ago in Mesopotamia, how they are
Right.
still relevant today and how they work, how a doctor would heal in old Mesopotamia and how it still can help or cure perhaps fever today. So it all comes together like that. And at the end, you realize the same goddess who was worshipped in one part of the world has simply taken on another name and is deified in the opposite part of the globe. So it is an intellectual discovery and exploration, that kind of journey. Because in our tradition, in our Wiccan tradition, it is the mind which is vital, keeping the mind sharp, keeping it well tuned and well honed. That is what keeps us going, what helps us in our everyday.
And you mean to say basically, if a god has been co-opted by organized religion, it's basically some pagan ritual or some pagan god who has been co-opted by organized religion and given a new backstory. Is that what you have observed through your study over the years?
True. Well, everything has a backstory, like you would say. So, while Orthodox religion has its own backstory and how it developed from the pagan might even have an even older backstory, which goes back to even more prehistoric and primitive times. So, evolution, as long as there has been human consciousness, evolution has always been concurrent with it. It could be something like an old tree or worship tradition from Siberia or a Shigi rival in the Russian part of the world, which has just become a Native American totem pole. So, as I said, it's a mixture of mythology, history, religion, everything.
And
That is
even
good.
that's a golden arc. And even I think this is from your first book. You did mention that crystals have the power to retain memories. And I think someone from the IBM Research Center, can't remember the name, Marcel, can't remember his surname, unfortunately. But yeah, you did reference someone from the IBM Research Center who was doing some research around this. Just curious, what are your findings about crystals and the power to retain memories?
Crystal clear quartz, as they say, that has always been used going back to the time of the ancient Greek. That has always been used for sort of the science come mysticism crossover. For at that time, in historic times, they believed that it was something which held messages from the gods. In later times, it has been found it has electric power. It can retain thought imprints. It can have a certain, if you hold it, it can respond to touch, to heat, to body electricity, things like that, which make it an ideal tool for responses to our brain waves. Another very interesting thing is laterite. You were talking of Konark a little while ago, weren't you?
Right. Yes.
Konark.
Yes.
Now, places like the Konark Sun Temple, places like the Hirapur Yogini Shrine in Orissa, they have laterite in their structure. Now, laterite and fluorite, the material, the stone from which many of the statues are in Konark and at Hirapur, they are known to have um, uh, very strong healing powers, even to the extent that modern medicine uses them for immunity-related cures.
Cancer or
Research for immune diseases, things like that. So these are things which are there in rock and stone and mineral and have come down through the ages. Perhaps today we can give it a name. Perhaps 1,000 years ago they had a different name. But that is also part of.
coming towards the end of this episode, I had one question for you, which you would be best placed to answer, given that you had been directly, indirectly involved with the Wiccan tradition for like ever since you were born, literally. You've seen your mother, then you actually embraced it.
I'm not telling you my age.
Sure, I'm not asking your age, but just curious, like how have you seen the evolution of the Wiccan tradition? As in back in the 90s, 80s, what were key facets of a Wiccan lifestyle which have changed? What has the connotation of a Wiccan lifestyle or its understanding in the public sphere? What have been the changes? If you could probably walk us through that.
When I was very, very young, I remember my mother first bringing the Wiccan movement into this part of the world. I remember the extreme reactions. There were those who were very scared. There were those who were very angry, extremely annoyed, shall we say. And then there were those who flocked to her for help, for succor. There used to be innumerable phone calls, doorbells ringing. That was not the time of email and internet. So it was pre that era. And our house would be constantly besieged by bells of all sorts, phones, doors, people, everything. But, and at that young age, I realized that something major was going on. Something very major was going on. It was very small. Over time, I have come to realize that, yes, witches, Wicca, witchcraft, at one time a very dirty word in our part of the world, has taken an interesting twist in the way that now people try to do, what we call in college slang, say, what we call a pylon. People nowadays are trying to pylon in the way they're trying to use my mother's name, they're trying to use Wicca's name, and they're trying to use it for their commercial purposes. Because in this era, I am seeing how the commercial aspect is really trying to latch on to the word Wicca. Because they feel not only if they use the word Wicca, it will somehow connect them to Ipsita Roy Chakraverti, and that will take them to the top tier, and they will have credibility, and they can then use it for their various commercial aspects. Because, for example, says what is all around us today, like tarot reading,
Right.
like various kinds of candle burnings, this magic, that magic, whatever, angels, demons, whatever you call them. So these kinds of things are not really our school of Wicca. But anyone who does anything comes and says, oh, I also do Wicca. Or I have learned from Ipsita Roy Chakraverti. It got to such a stage where we had to put up notices on our page saying if someone claims, please check with us because we have come to know that those who we have never met are making such false claims. Right. And then the started pouring in. And these were people we have no idea of. Maybe someone who came and got a book signed at a book launch somewhere is now, I have taken Diksha from her. I am a Wiccan practitioner. I can do this, that, and they are claiming to do strange things we have never even heard of. So I have seen how people are trying to make use of it for their own ends, or rather the misuse of it. So from being a bad word, I have seen how Wicca has become a word which everyone wants to latch onto for commercial gain. So that is something I have seen which proves not only the establishment of Wicca by my mother, but also how it has come out to this extent.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Final question. What's your future work? What can we expect from you in the near future? So, are you in the process of writing another novel, non-fiction? What are you actually working on?
My next book, which I'm very excited about, is on an ancestress of mine. I don't know if you read about her. It's Jamini Sen. She was a doctor. She was my great aunt and the first ever female fellow of the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons in Glasgow. And
FRCS.
FRCS, the woman to be FRCS Glasgow. And she was house physician to the Nepal royal family for a good 10. Her life is full of drama, romance, and that British India time, and there's touches of magic in there. So that book has gone to Penguin Random House. Should be out hopefully early next year.
Wow. Looking forward.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deepta Di, today for your time. This was indeed engaging. Just one question. I think I should have asked this earlier. In case someone wants to know more about Wicca and is a beginner who is just curious, would there be any resources, any books that you could probably recommend which they can peruse to get at least a sense of Wicca? Because to be honest, when I was preparing for the episode, I actually learned what Wicca is through a variety of sources. Your books obviously were a source, but Wicca as a religion does not have a very systematized source of knowledge which you could probably reference to understand. So just curious if there could be any primers.
I'm glad you brought up the word religion because in the Italian or was it Spanish press, I think they are the ones who have first acknowledged that while in the West, Wicca does have the status of a religion in many parts. In India, it has now become akin to a religion because of the work of my mother, Ipsita. So now Wicca is slowly coming into that religion aspect. It is getting that acknowledgement. So you could say the yogini of old is regaining her status, which is a fantastic thing to see in our lifetimes. It is really a transformative. To answer your question, if anyone wants to know anything about Wicca, I would say if they want to know about our school of Wicca, because nowadays Wicca has so many aspects. There are those who are the more New Age aligned, and those who are more our way aligned in the way more traditionalists. I would say the best source would be Beloved Witch and Beloved Witch Returns. That would give you a sense of the Wicca as we know it.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time today. All the best for your future projects, and this was indeed lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye.